Whenever you are ready, Bodie.
Cool. Hi, I'm Bodie Brown, and this is my 2026 Senior TED Talk. I believe in opportunity, and I believe in the idea that any living creature, from a great big elephant to a tiny little mouse, deserves the opportunity to grow and to change, and to make mistakes, and to live it up, just because it's an experience that you may only get to experience once. And so I think it's fair that we all get a shot at that. But sometimes life can be unfair, and this opportunity can be taken away from us. And example of that is like someone falsely accused of a crime. I like to compare that to animals in captivity, with the only real difference being that prison's framed as a punishment and captivity is framed as education. When in reality, it's like basically the same thing. We're just taking away their opportunity to live in life. And I think people over time have stopped caring about captive animals due to the fact that zoos have been around for so long that it seems to be more normal than it does unethical. And on top of that, animals can't directly communicate with us, so they can't detail and describe their suffering. And so if an ostrich can't be featured on Dr. Phil to pour its heart out, then I will. And so that's the mission today, is to help you understand what they go through in captivities. And that brings me to the question, what effect does captivity have on animals, and how can we ensure that the outcome is positive? And so captivity is not always bad. Sometimes it can be extremely crucial for the survival of certain species. An example of that is, this is just one example. It's a Arabian oryx that was successfully brought back through captive breeding, and there's many other species like black-footed ferret and the, not the Tasmanian tiger, but there's many. And but these benefits still don't change what captivity turns these animals into, and so that's what we're going to be exploring today. Captivity strips animals of their family, their natural environment, their identities, and their daily activities. They go from having freedom to being what I like to call entertainment slaves. Wild animals have a stress response system that they activate when they feel threatened, and it's for short-term survival. They do this by releasing adrenaline and cortisol, and so when they're in captivity, they're constantly stressed out due to the loss of their environment, the lack of space, which is crucial for wild animals. They need plenty of space to be happy and healthy, and on top of that, forced human interaction. It's like their natural instinct is to stay away from us in the wild. In zoos, it's just people, baby strollers walking by and all that, and so. And this constant being in stress 24/7, the brain starts to adapt to that, and so the brain reshapes itself to be able to survive that stress, and so they lose a lot of their their wildness, and the elevated stress levels also damage neurons in both brains. But it's not just the overall stress of the environment that harms the animals, but it's also the lack of exercise, because exercise increases the blood flow to the brain and enhances cognitive abilities. But in captivity, like I said, orcas go from swimming in over 100 miles a day to just circling the same little pool. And if you're in a kiddie pool next to a big tank, you're not going to want to swim around in the kiddie pool, and so they don't have motivation to move. And so the neurons in your brain need to be challenged. The brain's like a muscle, and once you stop using it, it weakens. And so the neurons in the brain starts to shrink because of the lack of exercise, and this then leads to what's called zoochosis, which is repetitive behavior that you'll see in zoos, with big cats. If you've ever been to the Denver Aquarium, they have a tiger exhibit, and I don't think I've ever been there and not seen that tiger just do anything besides pace back and forth. So that's one of the big signs, is just constant back and forth pacing, like repetitive, like head bobbing and like gnawing on the bars. But a lot of animals also start to become like mentally unstable, and they start to become aggressive. And the best example of that could be killer whales, due to the fact that they're like the apex predators. They could easily, tear us apart, and they're so smart that they choose not to. But in captivity, the only confirmed orca killings have all been in captivity. And a fun fact about this picture is, this is at SeaWorld in 2016. This is Tilikum the whale that was responsible for 3 of the killings. And so I saw that whale like the year before it died, which is, I think that's pretty cool. But yeah. And so how can we change this problem? So I was looking at some research done by an ecologist named Patrick Guy, and he states that if you don't provide an animal with a similar environment to its natural environment, they won't behave how they do in the wild. And so I think like creating the most authentic living habitat as possible is extremely beneficial for the animals. And another solution could be what's called a sit-su conservation, which is basically like conservation efforts, but it's actually like in the wild. So they're protecting the animals, but they're not like keeping them in cages and like turning them into something they're not. They're still wild animals, but at the same time they're still being protected. But at the same time, this may not work because you can never like end captivity. People are always going to want to see. No one's going to travel all the way to Africa to see a lion if they don't have the money or whatever. So that's like not the best solution. I think keeping that authentic living habitat could be extremely like beneficial, because example that a while ago I went to a big cat rescue in Keensburg, where they provide the animals with at least like a football field worth of land to roam around in. And those animals, like when I was there, they're like moving around. They're like kind of active instead of just sitting around or behaving in the same way. And another example of that is this place called Ventara in India. It's kind of like a private zoo, and they try to make it as like more authentic than just like keeping them in habitats that are similar to theirs. They like keep all the animals who would have been together in the wild in the same enclosures, and I think that's that's Ventara right there. And they like have with elephants, the elephants are able to like leave and go out and explore the wild, and they're able to come back and get veterinary care, and they have a whole system for like baths for the elephants. And yeah, so I think that just keeping that living space as authentic as possible and providing them with enough space could be the best way to keep these animals happy and healthy. And yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's ask some questions to Bodie.
I'd like to know what the positive purposes of zoos are.
It's for education and for care. So a lot of zoos say it's for education, so we get to a close examination of these animals, so we get to know more about them. And sometimes they just say it's like for sanctuaries, they're basically just for care. The animals that can't survive in the wild, they get put in sanctuaries. And a lot of times it's for the like reintroduction of like endangered species. There's many different reasons, but I think the main reason is framed as education, but in reality I think it's more for profit. I mean, not profit, for entertainment.
Are these traditionally for-profit organizations, or are they non-profits?
It depends. Like the one I was talking about, like Denver Zoo and like that is for profit, but like the one I was talking about, the Keensburg, that's like a non-profit, and like the Vintara, that's another non-profit.
Are all zoos created equal?
Could you elaborate? Like,
Like, are there zoos that you would criticize and also zoos that you would elevate as examples of, like, accede to, like, the things you were recommending? Like what, I heard, like, it kind of, your advocacy here is that zoos are maybe doing something differently to recreate the habitat in a healthy way. And your question referred to positive outcomes.
yeah.
How can we ensure positive outcomes? And so, I'm curious, are there zoos that have positive outcomes and zoos that don't? And how are you making that distinction? And
Like with example, like the Denver Zoo, I mean, they're, like you look at that enclosure and it's just like rocks, like there's no grass, there's no nothing, and it's just like completely like unrecognizable for them. And as I mentioned, like the ecologist Patrick Guy stated that like, do you want them to be in an environment similar to their natural habitat? And I think places like that just don't even try to make it like authentic for them, those are the zoos that should be criticized more. And like the zoos like Vintara and the Keensburg that actually make an attempt to keep these animals, like they do what they can to keep them happy. They like have, they're able to actually be free and not just be entertainment slaves. So I think the places like Vintara and the Keensburg, Big Cat Rescue do a good job at making it like a good living space for the animals.
so those examples have positive outcomes. So for you, positive outcomes are, name them.
If the animals are just like, if they're happy and like, and I forgot to mention, this same guy stated that like a lot of animals that grew up or like were raised in captivity, like generations of animals born in captivity, their brains are like naturally like shrunken, and I think if they're able to get that proper exercise and they're able to behave how they did in the wild, then that's like the most positive outcome.
Okay.
Is there a noticeable difference between the zoos that are for-profit and that are non-profit?
Yeah, like with like I said, with like that Keensburg, they have all that like fields and fields of land for these animals, and you go to like the Denver Zoo or just any little small zoo like that, and they have like no space for the animals. They're in cages. It's you can tell the difference.
Wouldn't there, because they have funding, wouldn't they have the money to do it bigger and the non-profit wouldn't have money to make it bigger?
Yeah, but they just don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, some places do, but a lot of times they just don't. Zaina?
I don't know how much research you did into like efforts that have already been made to kind of like make these establishments better, but like for example like SeaWorld, there's so much controversy surrounding it and so many like efforts and protests that have been made to like disenfranchise that like giant tourist attraction that is in a lot of big cities. Like, is there anything that you saw of like any, I don't know, like result of that? Because I feel like it's been a long time that that's been known that it's a bad establishment, but it's still so.
So like with SeaWorld, they like there's like this whole thing where with the orcas, they for them to do like their tricks during their shows, they get fed to, like they'll starve them to get them to do the tricks, and so they said that they stopped doing that, but in reality there's like, so like with SeaWorld, you got like this big thing, this big like screen right here, and so usually like before there was like the controversy, they'd just feed them right there, but then people got mad, so then they taught the orcas to go around and this was like an ex-employee at SeaWorld that was like saying this in the documentary, said that they go around the screen and they get their foods from back there. So I mean they like make it look, a lot of these places make it look like they're actually changing, but in reality they're just, it's not, you know?
But like you can see that they probably made no effort to make the like habitats
Oh,
anything
yeah, no.
close to
No,
what
not at all.
Mount would be used to.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
just cool.
California, it's, I think in like 2017, a couple years after the documentary Blackfish came out, it's like illegal to have orcas in captivity in California until the rest of them die out. So, I mean, that was a pretty big change, but you know, they don't really. No, they haven't changed. They haven't made the enclosures bigger or done anything beneficial like that. Yeah.
I have a two-part question. One is, what's your model zoo or situation for people to see animals? And related to that, what is the value you see in having establishments that are zoo-like or some kind of place where animals are in some kind of captivity in the interest of educating the public about the importance of taking care of various species in the land?
I think the ideal zoo would just be one that's like I mentioned before, obviously the habitats have to be as authentic as possible, and they should have enough room, enough like space to be happy and to get that physical exercise. So that's really important to me. But the education, I think because I mean I've never learned a single thing from a zoo. Anything I've learned from animals has always been through a documentary, through YouTube or whatever. I've never learned anything from being in a zoo actually. And so I think the education part, making the education interesting for them to for people to learn. I don't know, honestly. For
Fair
that.
enough, thanks. I appreciate and respect your perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your answer.
Arlo.
Do you think zoos are kind of bad by nature, or is there any way that they could be good?
I mean, they can be